The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. I must begin with the news that the White House is planning to disband its COVID-19 response team in May of this year, in just over a month. This is despite the reality that COVID-19 is still with us and hundreds of people are dying every day, thousands each month. The White House has now officially thrown in the towel. According to CNN, the White House will disband its coronavirus response team after the COVID-19 public health emergency ends in May, a current and former official said. The team has begun to dwindle in recent months, and as the administration has started to shift its response to the virus from the emergency that defined the early part of President Joe Biden's term in office, the team will now be disbanded as the public health emergency is set to expire on May 11th. Quote, as a result of this administration's historic response to COVID-19, we are as a nation, we are in a safer place, better than we were 3 years ago. COVID no longer disrupts our lives because of investments and our efforts to mitigate its worst impacts, a senior administration official said in a statement. I'm taken aback by that sentence, by that quote. As a result of this administration's historic response to COVID-19, we as a nation are in a safer, better place than we were 3 years ago. COVID no longer disrupts our lives because of the investments and efforts to mitigate its worst impacts. COVID is still extremely disruptive. The only way COVID-19 is not disruptive is if you decide inside of yourself to just ignore it, to take the risk on. And too many Americans have had to just simply pretend as though COVID-19 isn't real, isn't still disruptive. You know, a lot of the criticisms I have of this era of COVID-19 deals with the inability of human beings, particularly Americans, to just simply do something that helps another person, like wear a mask. Wearing a mask is effective if the person who has COVID-19 is wearing it. Right. And we saw that once people realized that, them wearing a mask was beneficial to someone else, we then saw people stop wearing masks. That's where the bulk of my criticism has come, particularly because of anti-vaxxers, the conservative movement, all these people doing everything they can to spread COVID as far as possible. People like Rand Paul, who I will find a clip and play it for you later, who is still actively doing his best to end the COVID response even earlier than May. So the bulk of my concern and complaints about this period of pandemic has been in relation to individuals refusing to simply do a small task that could have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. I do believe we as individuals own a portion of that. But the reality is that this governments across this planet have absolutely forced the majority of humans into a position where they had to go out into this pandemic, into a full-blown pandemic, to work, to live, to survive. And we are now at the stage where not only are we having to go out into the pandemic, for our own mental health, we're having to operate as though the pandemic is not here and not present. I mean, we can't honestly sit around and be concerned with dying when the government has put us in the best position to get sick. I mean, let's be real. How many people have contracted COVID-19 over and over and over again, multiple times, because they have been forced back into classrooms? They have been forced back into offices. Mayor Eric Adams in the city of New York has demanded that store owners ask their patrons to take off their mask before they come into their buildings. Literally doing the exact thing that's going to get more people sick and killed of COVID-19. But the White House is disbanding its response team and the official emergency is going to be over in May, even though now COVID-19 is the third leading cause of death right after cancer, all cancers combined. We are, in fact, still in a state of emergency, whether the government wants to admit it or not. We are still in a full-blown pandemic, but we have the unfortunate trauma of having to operate as if it doesn't exist. Because, you simply can't, go into the office thinking that, somebody might be breathing droplets that will lead to me getting COVID-19. You can't. It's not healthy. You simply you'll collapse underneath the stress of how completely sadistic and absurd our country is. The fact that we really are now resting in the absurdity of the pandemic. We're resting. We are calling it quits. We're throwing in the towel. Now after 3 years, I get it. 3 years is a long time. I don't think I could quarantine and self-isolate for another day. I'm not. I can't. I can't because this country has forced us into the position where we just have to go out and do our best to survive. That's where we are. We are a failed state when it comes to COVID-19. And this is precisely what conservatives and Republicans and oligarchs in this country want. Democrats aren't much better. In fact, this is happening on Joe Biden's watch. This is Joe Biden's White House that is responding like this, ending the pandemic response team, ending the emergency declaration, now making way for vaccines to cost $126 per shot when it costs something like $1 to make. I mean, we're real good at that here in the United States. It costs less than $1 to create insulin. And just until recently, manufacturers were able to charge exorbitant prices. See, this is not only the politics of COVID-19. This is the capitalism. This is the economic policy of COVID-19. This is what the Democrats have capitulated to. They have rolled over and given way to corporate interests, which honestly, very simple. Corporate America needs you to continue to consume at the exact level, if not more, every year over year. You have to consume more and more. You have to spend more of your money. You have to go further into debt. And oh, by the way, you cannot isolate. You cannot quarantine. You cannot social distance. You cannot wear a mask and you can't work from home. That's another thing happening in being spearheaded by the likes of Eric Adams, who's a Democrat in New York, trying to ensure that people no longer work from home. Why? Because there are too many businesses, too many corporate interests that are dependent on you getting out of your house, putting gas in your car, getting something to eat in a drive-thru, driving to work, and then sitting in an office where you have to breathe in the carbon dioxide breathed out by everyone else in your office, whether they're sick or not. They have been demanded back into their office spaces. So this is the conclusion. This is where we end our fight against COVID-19. This is the surrender. This is throwing up the white flag and saying, COVID-19, have your way in this country. This is what the politicians are saying. And I hope that we can really just take a moment to absorb what this means for humanity in the long run when the ruling regime, I'm not talking about one specific administration, I'm talking about the regime that controls this planet, particularly the United States of America. The consensus that is agreed upon between Democrats and Republicans, that ruling regime has said, you're on your own. We're not fighting COVID-19 anymore because there are too many financial interests that are involved with making money off of COVID-19. There are too many politicians like Rand Paul, whose wife has investments in a company that produces treatment for COVID-19. There are too many doctors like Stella Emanuel who charge some on her website right now. Was it $285 for a teleappointment so that she can prescribe to you hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin who has so far prescribed over 100,000 prescriptions. I mean, you do the math. There are just too many people getting rich off of this pandemic. And there are too many corporate interests that cannot handle even 2 weeks. They couldn't handle 2 weeks of shutting down, let alone 2 or 3 months of shutting down what we properly needed in order to save millions of lives. We couldn't do it because of corporate interests insisting on you consuming at higher levels every year. There is no pause button on capitalism when it is so used to draining you every single day of your life energy, of your resources, of your time, and in the case of COVID-19, of so many people's lives. I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to acknowledge and support and cheer on and just celebrate my sister from another mister, Georgia Fort, who has launched into the deep when it comes to journalism and when it comes to television. She now has a show every Saturday on the CW in the Minneapolis Twin City area where she is broadcasting critical stories that in so many cases, so many instances would never be heard. Take a listen to this trailer from Georgia Fort's new show, Here's the Truth with Georgia Fort.
Coming up on Here's the Truth, we sit down with Attorney General Keith Ellison.
I don't like people getting killed, and I don't like people's cars getting stolen.
More on the state's investigation into the 2 automakers he believes are at fault for the spike in car thefts. And a local organization is restoring hope for those who are pursuing freedom from the inside. Plus, buckle up for a joyride with soul singer Mayada. Don't miss Here's the Truth, Saturdays at 11 a.m. on the CW Twin Cities.
Now, congratulations, Georgia. I've had a chance to watch the first 2 episodes, and the production is simply amazing. The stories are critical, and the communication of all of this is just top notch. I'm proud to have worked with Georgia Fort so extensively over the years. For those of you who may be new and weren't with us when Georgia and I were doing On the Clock with Georgia Fort, and it was a part of our lineup on the mornings where we had the Benjamin Dixon Show, On the Clock with Georgia Fort, and then Like It or Not, we just had a chance to see Georgia be phenomenal in her work, in her analysis, in her journalism, in her commentary. And so I'm excited about her launching out and saturating the Twin Cities area, which right now is the centerpiece of so many. It is the flashpoint of so many different activist movements and protests. Remind you that there's still ongoing protests in the area right now for George Floyd. The protests never stopped there where he was killed. And so the area that Georgia is covering right now, the stories that are coming out, particularly the story of the soil being in East Phillips, Minneapolis, being contaminated, arsenic being leaked out, and residents dying of heart conditions that they were not diagnosed with as children. It is not hereditary, but caused by the pollution there in the city. This is a story that Georgia Fort is exposing and has on Front Street in her first episode. So I want to encourage you to take a minute to go to georgiafort.com and watch the episodes of Here's the Truth with Georgia Fort. I am so excited. I'm like, I'm proud of that sister. I'm proud of the work that she does, and I'm excited to know her as she gets ready to launch even further into the deep and do amazing things. Go to georgiafort.com and show her some love.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Republicans are now calling for the arrest of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg as he has moved forward, commencing a grand jury to indict Donald Trump for charges that he's facing in the state of New York. Republicans like Rand Paul, Marjorie Taylor Greene have called for him to be arrested because, well, he is investigating and potentially bringing charges up against Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. Now, we covered this on Tuesday. The investigation centers around his hush money payment to Stormy Daniels for an alleged affair that they had. Now, Donald Trump denies all parts of the allegations, but his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is involved and has stated that, well, this happened. The hush money, not only did the affair happen, but the hush money happened as well. Now, we covered it in detail. Donald Trump suggested that he might be arrested on this past Tuesday. That didn't happen. Here we are on Thursday, and there's still no arrest. There were some threats called in to various grand juries in the city of New York because, well, conservatives, Make America Great Again, they are ready to protest. Not many of them, some of them, enough to do damage, enough to call in threats, but not enough to get critical mass in the streets, as we've seen videos come out of all of the people who Donald Trump was able to summon to a protest. He called for a protest and, well, tens of people showed up. And so reinforcements have been called in the form of Rand Paul and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are now attacking the district attorney. Now, let's be sure of something. There is the problem of retribution. Marjorie Taylor Greene has demonstrated that, well, people like her are willing to wait years to get their vengeance. She was ousted from her committee assignments in 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and she waited 2 years to actively go after everyone she could who participated in ousting her to get her revenge to her. I say that in context of this conversation because we have to be certain about one thing. Republicans will investigate and try to bring up charges against every single Democrat going forward. Now, does this mean that no one should go after Donald Trump for fear of retribution? No, but it most certainly means that if Democrats and people of good faith, I separate those two groups because the Venn diagram is not an overlap, but if Democrats and people of good faith choose to pursue justice, now this is the catch, like it is right to go after people who commit crimes. But we are living in an environment that simply going after Donald Trump is gearing Republicans up to do what they have lusted for a very long time, and that is a witch hunt. Republicans have demonstrated that they have no regard for the facts of a case. They will investigate you without end. Remember Benghazi? Republicans most certainly will go as far as arresting you and getting you put in jail for, well, literally anything that they can conjure up. Now, you have to juxtapose this with the people they are defending. In the case of January 6th, they're defending insurrectionists, treasonous individuals who stormed the Capitol. But because the FBI and the United States government is trying to hold those people accountable who committed an act of insurrection, of violence, well, conservatives are ready to arrest everybody. They want to put everybody in jail just so that they can have an exercise in retribution for what they did wrong as compared to, well, what are the actual charges that they're trying to bring up against DA Alvin Bragg? What do they want to arrest him for? Investigating Donald Trump. So this is where we are. We're at the point where if you are a duly elected official or you are an officer of the law, if you're someone who's there to execute the law, well, no, you can only do it if it doesn't hurt their political allies. If one of their political allies, Donald Trump, is guilty, you have to turn a blind eye and let him keep getting away with it, or else the conservative movement in this country will come after you to arrest you. So it neutralizes our ability, or at least that's the attempt. They are attempting to neutralize our ability as a society to hold political actors accountable. That's the agenda. And in this specific case, they're doing their best to ensure that Donald Trump, the Republican former president, is not held accountable for his crimes. So the question remains, can this country ever hold a former president accountable? Or once you become president, does that give you a license to get away with any number of crimes that you can dare to try to get away with so long as you are a Republican? My friends over at TYT, Cenk Uygur and Ana Kasparian, love them. They have waded into one of the most divisive wedge issues that we are facing right now. Trans rights. Not only trans rights, because generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that TYT has historically come out on the side of trans women, trans rights, the LGBTQIA community. But specifically, and I'll read the tweet from Ana Kasparian that I'm referring to, the online left has demonstrated exactly what I have been talking about for a while, how divisive and how easily divided we are around the LGBTQIA community, specifically the trans community, and how conservatives have used that as a wedge issue to divide any hope of solidarity. Solidarity at the level that we need to fight back against the fascists who are quite literally organizing to overthrow this democracy. We are being neutralized on the left because, well, it's easy to divide us over trans rights. Easy. You know why? Because, well, we all have differing opinions, all have different levels of bigotry that we all deal with that comes from every type of community. And this is the issue that TYT and Ana Kasparian particularly has waded into. And I want to read her tweet. This is what she said. I am a woman. This is Ana Kasparian from TYT. I am a woman. Please don't ever refer to me as a person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates. How do you people not realize how degrading this is? You can support the transgender community without doing this ish. I want to start here by saying my rule of thumb is if a person wants to be referred to in a particular fashion, it's not a big deal for me to do it. In fact, it's the least I can do in order to be a decent human being. If I want to get into a conversation with that individual, I best refer to them in the manner that they choose to be referred to. Fine. If that's how Ana wants to be referred to, and that's her business, and I will respect that very easily so, just like I respect everyone else's choices in terms of their pronouns. Here's the problem that I have. I have a serious problem with the asymmetric nature of comparing our individual preferences with the life and death situation that another group is facing. The importance of those two things simply do not match up in my book. And I will use myself going forward in this conversation so it doesn't seem like I'm attacking TYT, because you know how we get in this space. So allow me to use myself as an example. It would be wrong for me to place my disagreements, my concern, my lack of understanding, my discomfort, or it makes me whatever number of reasons that I may have had or currently have with the trans community. I would be wrong to juxtapose that, put it up in comparison, to put it into the national conversation when the LGBTQIA community, particularly the trans community, is targeted with death, targeted with hate crimes. Targeted with bomb threats, targeted for eradication. I just don't think that my discomfort or my lack of understanding should be compared to people who are facing eradication. We're talking about a community that is the direct ire of the entire nation, where legislation is being passed all around the country attacking the transgender community simply for existing. And I'm sorry, I just don't feel like our discomfort, our disagreement that falls into the category of preferences should be juxtaposed to the life or death situation that the transgender community is facing right now. It just simply shouldn't. And that's my view. That's where where all of my preferences and all of my thoughts and all of my concerns and all of my, upbringing and all of my baggage and all that. I check all of that at the door when we talk about someone's humanity. And I also check it at the door because what a person does with their own personal body and their life ain't none of my business. So that's another easy way that I check my own problems at the door when it comes time to be an ally for the LGBTQIA community. Because you know what? When I see fascists lining up against a community, then I know which side I need to be on. I need to be on the side of whatever community is under attack by the fascists. And while I know, let's be fair, TYT has a history of supporting the LGBTQIA community and fighting on behalf of trans rights. I just think the juxtaposition of anyone's individual preferences and likes should not come in competition, rhetorically or otherwise, with the fight for the lives of trans people or the lives of any community. I think our personal preferences can be set aside or at least compartmentalized while we fight for their survival. And this is especially important when we are currently living in a season when conservatives are doing everything they can to divide us even further around trans rights, right? When they're doing everything they can to divide us in every way imaginable to keep us in our silos. I talk about this all the time. It's the fact that we are all fighting in separate silos, but not fighting together, that gives these fascists the leverage and the room, the latitude that they need to operate the way they're operating. And so right now, specifically at this time, fine, Anna made it clear what she prefers. Fine. Okay. But at the same time, the people who get the most ammunition out of this are the people who are actively discussing the eradication of the transgender community, or rather, should I say, like Michael Knowles said, transgenderism, right? The play on words, as if that's not a threat to transgender people. These are the stakes. And I just feel like the two don't compare. I feel like there is a time for us to hash out our differences. I think that there is going to be a time for us to work out the details and the nuances of how we coexist. No one is saying that coexistence is going to be something that's going to be easy. We're not saying that. What I am saying is that we are dealing with, on the other side of the equation, Nazis, fascists, far right-wing extremist zealots who want to eradicate the LGBTQIA community, starting with the trans community. I honestly think that should be all we're talking about. When someone's life and their existence is under threat, I don't think I'm going to bring attention to my personal grievances with that community, me personally. And again, I don't have grievances so much as I had to grow. I come from a deeply religious background. And so I have had to grow out of my homophobia, grow out of my transphobia, and to see the need for solidarity and to see their humanity. And that has put me in a position where I can clearly see, you know what, my discomfort, my personal preferences, my likes or dislikes should not be compared to a group that is absolutely being targeted right now. That's my opinion. And so while I respect Anna's preferences and her opinion, I also hope that you all can respect mine. That's it for today's show. We are going to be live tonight. That is a change in schedule. Tonight we will be live instead of tomorrow night. James, DJ Exclusive, Rebecca Azor, they will be both with me live tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be live with Like It or Not on YouTube. Make sure you go over and check us out. Become a patron, patreon.com/like it or not. Support them as well as this show, patreon.com/the BPD show. I want to give one more time before we get out of here. I want to give a shout out to our sister from another Mr. Georgia Fort, who is doing amazing work. We want to continue to support her. Check her out, georgiafort.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tonight, or we'll see you next time.